Hi everybody, it's Miss Lorenz. This is lesson 1, the intro video for 6th grade math for the week of May 4th through May 8th. Can you guys make sure that you have a pencil and paper and you're ready to take some notes? Maybe it's your math notebook, but there are definitely some things that you're going to want to get down for this. Make sure that you know you can pause the video, go back and rewatch it if you need to. But we're going to be talking about some really important terms that will come up throughout the rest of this week. All right, this is our last week, by the way, of our current unit on equations and expressions, and so we'll be moving into a new unit next week that talks about data and how we distribute and interpret data. All right, so here we go. Lesson 1, 6th grade math. So as you know, we've been talking about equations and expressions, and we know that equations are very useful for describing sets of equivalent ratios. Well, they're really useful for describing any relationship between quantities, especially equivalent ratios like this. So here's an example with a recipe. I like using food contexts, as you guys know. So we'll say that a pie recipe, this would be an apple pie recipe, calls for 3 green apples for every 5 apples. So remember what that means. That means that for every 8 apples, 3 of them would be green and 5 of them would be red. So if we had 16 apples, we would need 6 of those to be green and 10 of those to be red, right? And so we can make a table that represents all the relationships for a given number of green and red apples. So for every 3 green, 5 red. For every 6 green, 10 red. For every 9 green, 15 red. For every 12 green, 20 red. We can also write an equation to describe the relationship between green and red apples. Notice that the number of red apples that we need is greater than the number of green apples. And the number of red apples is 5/3, or 1 1/3 times greater, 5/3 as large as the green apples. We could also write this equation for the green apples. Well, the green apples, notice it's smaller than the number of red apples needed. The green apples would be, their number would be always 3/5 as large as the number of red apples needed. And so what we're going to talk about is what these relationships mean in terms of the variables. And so we're going to be talking about independent variables and dependent variables. And I know I've talked about this a little bit in science. Make sure that you get both of these terms written down right now. Maybe pause your computer right now and get them written down. So in this particular equation, let's start with this one. This would be good to get down as well. The number of red apples that we need is equal to 5/3 the green apples. So in this equation, listen really carefully to this. If G changes, then R is affected by that change, right? So I'm going to say that again. If G changes, if the number of green apples changes, then the number of red apples is affected by that change, or the number of red apples also changes. So because of that, we call the green apples the independent variable, and the red apples that's affected by that change, or is dependent upon that number of green apples, is the dependent variable. So here's an example. If we had 270 green apples, then obviously our number of red apples is going to be affected by that. So we're going to take 5/3 times 270. The way I did this mentally is I just thought of 1/3 of 270, and I thought, well, 1/3 of 27 is 9, so 1/3 of 270 would be 90, and then I need 5/3, so 5 90s would be 450 red apples would be needed. All right, we can look at the same thing with the other equation. So in this case, if R changes, then G is affected. So if the number of red apples changes, the number of green apples is affected by that change. So in this case, R is the independent variable and G is the dependent variable. And here's our example. If we have 275 red apples, then we're going to have to take 3/5 of that to figure out our green apples. So 1/5 of 275 would be 55, and 3 groups of 55 would be 165 green apples are needed. So I know that was kind of a lot for an intro video. Make sure that you have these 2 words down. You're going to practice identifying independent and dependent variables in this lesson. Keep working hard, you guys. You're doing great. Make sure you're also getting away from your computers and getting outside. I miss you guys so much. Talk to you soon.